You're staring at an empty calendar for the evening, and your first reaction is quiet relief. You would rather read a book than go to a crowded bar. But almost immediately, a small voice creeps in, asking why you don't want to be around people more, or if there is something wrong with you for wanting to hide. We are conditioned to treat introversion like a personality defect. Society often labels it as social anxiety, or assumes it is a stubborn kind of shyness you are supposed to outgrow with enough exposure to the outside world. Carl Jung completely rejected that premise. He did not approach introversion as a social handicap. As a pioneering psychological scientist, Jung spent decades rigorously studying the mechanics of the mind to map out exactly how different human psyches actually operate. Introversion is about the biological direction of psychic energy. Extrovert's energy flows outward, seeking external nourishment. The introvert's psyche pulls energy inward, toward thought and reflection. This unchangeable biological fact is baked into your architecture from day one. Because that inner world is densely layered and rich, it requires continuous attention. When an introvert says they need alone time, they describe a biological necessity comparable to hunger. Choosing solitude is an act of strict alignment with how their mind was built to function. Jung used the word libido to describe this psychic energy, not in the Freudian sexual sense, but as the finite life force that powers your capacity to think, process, and connect. For an introvert, social interaction acts as a direct, ongoing withdrawal from that limited fuel supply. The cost fluctuates wildly depending on the room. A genuine conversation draws energy, but returns actual meaning. A superficial gathering, however, bankrupts those reserves immediately. Engaging in endless surface-level pleasantries costs massive amounts of psychic fuel and returns absolutely zero meaning to the system. To navigate those hollow spaces, humans utilize what Jung called a persona. Taking its name from the heavy masks worn by ancient actors, the persona is the socially acceptable face you project to keep the peace and meet external expectations. For an introvert, keeping that mask in place is active, manual labor. You are constantly monitoring the environment, editing your natural responses in real time, and projecting an enthusiasm you do not feel. Managing the massive gap between your actual thoughts and what the room demands requires relentless concentration. Extroverts experience that exact same room as a charging station. The ambient noise, the rapid chatter, and the external interactions actually deposit fresh energy back into their psychic bank account. That distinct mechanical difference explains why low-quality social environments shatter an introvert's stamina. They demand maximum, uninterrupted performance with zero authentic return, leaving the psyche utterly drained. When you spend excessive time performing for an audience, you force the rest of your personality into what Jung called the shadow. The shadow silently accumulates all the authentic thoughts, opinions, and real emotions you actively suppressed just to keep a superficial conversation alive. Over months and years, that heavy suppression takes a physical toll. You develop a dull, lingering numbness. You can stand in a room full of people who are directly speaking to you and still feel entirely erased. The persona is executing the dialogue, and the actual you is trapped underneath. The moment you close your front door, that suffocating dynamic shatters. The audience disappears. The artificial persona is no longer required. The suppressed, authentic self finally gets the raw oxygen it needs to move, expand, and process reality again. Giving that authentic self room to operate triggers the central task of a human life, a process Jung called individuation. It is the lifelong work of becoming the whole, integrated, honest version of who you actually are. As an introvert engages in this honest self-examination, their clarity sharpens. Older, self-aware introverts become highly selective about their social circles because their tolerance for environments that require them to fake their identity simply drops to zero. You cannot do the hard work of honest self-integration while actively managing a social performance. True solitude provides the quiet, mandatory laboratory conditions required for individuation to take place. Jung lived these theories personally. In 1923, he built a primitive stone tower on the shores of Lake Zurich. He lived there for weeks at a time, without electricity, without a telephone, and without running water, deliberately stripping away external noise. He maintained a massively successful career and a family. He built the tower as a clear, rational decision to give his mind the exact environment it needed to execute its deepest, most demanding work. That lingering guilt you feel about staying home is an absorbed societal script. It is the noise of a culture that incorrectly equates constant visibility with worthiness, assuming a fully booked schedule is the only evidence of a successful life. You neutralize that guilt through small, direct decisions. When you decline an invitation, you do not need to invent an elaborate excuse or deliver a defense of your nervous system. You simply state that you are at capacity for the day. Fiercely guarding your energy allows you to deploy it where it counts. By refusing to burn out on shallow interactions, you show up completely for the relationships that matter. You are fully present, entirely yourself, and free of the mask. Choosing a quiet evening alone is an act of psychological integrity. You are honoring the architecture of your mind and refusing to trade your genuine inner coherence just to look normal to everyone else.